I really like telling stories about individual unique trees, but we've got an individual house here that has a tree that is really special. This house was built in 1914, and clearly this tree was planted way back when. So this pine tree, and I want to talk about the species a little bit later on. This pine tree, which they called me out and said they have this huge Italian stone pine. So I got there and I took a look at it. I said, yeah, that's a big stone pine, all right. But as I was working on the tree, I started looking at some of the details, and I thought, wow, the bark kind of looks like a stone pine, but you don't see pines this big around here too often. And I thought, it's just not quite the same. So I was a little bit perplexed. Let me talk about the job a little bit first. They just bought the house last year, and they were concerned about the tree. They had never had anyone work on it, but clearly somebody had been doing work on it for a number of years. And it didn't appear that there was any improper work. It had never been topped. All the cuts seemed good. There were 4 cables up in the tree. But there was one very large limb that was hanging over their house that they were concerned about. And rightfully so. It was far too heavy. This tree was, I'd say at least 100 feet tall. It was just this massive monster tree.
I just want you to bounce
But the
on it a little
stature
bit.
of it just didn't feel quite
Tell me what
right.
you
I've
think.
seen stone pines this big, but they're generally a little bit wider. So I worked ground
like
all
it's
day
moving
and
pretty
managed the
good.
rope and hauled brush. Jorge got up in the tree and did all the pruning, and
All
I
right, can you
directed
go down
him.
to the
and
next cable too?
we actually had a lot of fun this day. It's always great to get into a really special tree. And the homeowners actually found us by doing some internet searching, and they saw my YouTube channel, and the guy says, "You're the one I want to work on this tree. I don't want anybody else." I still gave him a pretty fair bid on it, I believe. But
Yeah.
as soon as I saw that tree, I thought, oh yeah, I really want to work
Right.
on it. My only regret was that I worked the ground. I didn't get up in the tree. But we're a 3-man team, and when you're doing a lot of roping, somebody's got to be on the rope, somebody's got to be hauling the brush and chipping and cleaning up. And it worked out fine. I felt like I was part of the whole operation. All we did was weight reduction on the side over the house, major deadwood on the rest of the tree, but we did do a lot of inspecting of the tree as well. So there was some cables up there they wanted us to test. And it's kind of hard to test a cable. So, you can look at the cable, you can see if there's any signs of decay, you can make a judgment as
Good
to
job,
what
Blair.
type of an installation it was. And you can also make determinations on how tense the cable is. So you can either stand on it or push on it, and that'll give you some feedback. But this is what it looked like when we were all done. I'm quite proud of it. We did not do the entire tree. I just charged them for a day's work. It was based on time, and I told them ahead of time. But here I want to get into what type of pine this is. It had lots of little cones, and I want you to take a note of the needles. They were in bundles of 2. Those are called the fascicles. But I kept looking at it, and I thought, okay, now I'm sure this isn't a stone pine. And I kept looking at things. The needles were a little bit smaller, and there was different aspects of the tree. And, in my area, we only work on about 10, maybe 12 different varieties of pine tree. And there are so many pines, so many that I've never seen before, so many I don't know. There's what we did to the one limb that was over the house. And that looks like a stub there. I want you to take a closer look at that stub. The backside of it had a big limb going off that fed the foliage on the other side, so it wasn't really a stub, but it looked like it. It also had these odd growths on it that were, I don't know if they were burls or what. They didn't quite look like a burl, but they were. Look at that. Now that's definitely a male tree. But it was huge. That was really, really big. And then I started looking for pine cones, because the cones are a really good way to determine what type of a pine tree this is. So they weren't very large, and the cones on a stone pine are much larger than this. And this, all I could find was the remnants of a few cones, and the ground was littered with the pieces of cones, but not complete cones. So Lucy came out, I looked at it, I asked a couple of other friends, I sent some pictures out, and to the best of my ability, I'm going to call this an Aleppo pine. Neat old house. I'd like to know the history of who built it. And back in 1914, when San Jose was a brand new city that was just coming along, there probably were orchards all the way around. They also had this palm tree in their yard, and I looked at it close, and the smooth bark palms, like the Washingtonias, that as the fronds come off, they come off clean.
Yeah.
A lot of people use spurs, and
Looks good to
for
me.
decades this tree has been spurred. And a lot of people say, well, they're monocots, they'll tolerate it. But it sure looks terrible. I mean, there's so many new palm diseases out there. So I started looking at some of these old spur marks, and you could see they were going in quite deep. And what kind of internal decay is associated with these spur marks. I have never dissected a palm tree that was spurred like this and tried to see clearly how much damage there is associated with the old spur marks. But there's got to be a better way. There's I could think of setting up a tool where you wrap like a 3-inch piece of webbing with a strap that comes down to your feet, and you run the webbing up, and it tightens up. There should be a way that may not be as fast as using spurs, but gosh, there's got to be a better way. I mean, look at the size of this tree. They asked me, they said it's got some dead fronds up there, and I said, I really don't want to do it. Hey, thanks for watching, and please subscribe.